And we're back to let the people decide. I'm Porter Davis, and I've asked Adam Moto to join me here.
Happily, Porter. It's a pleasure.
Well, it is. I appreciate the good work you're doing and the courage you show and the diligence you show. You're doing a lot of things to make a difference.
High praise from you, sir. I appreciate that.
Well, it's sincere. And we're here today to tackle basically a tough subject for me. I wish I didn't have to do it, but I have to because we have a very important election coming up, particularly here in Oklahoma in the 5th District. In fact, coming over here today after doing my research for this event, I took the theology book that I've been reading out of my bookcase, and I got both my copies of different versions of The Art of War, Sun Tzu. Because the fact of the matter is, folks, I've been saying for several years we're heading towards a civil war, and it's only been very, very recently I've thought, my gosh, we've been in a civil war.
Yeah, at what point do you say, here we are?
At what point? Yeah, I mean, if you look back to the lead up, we are in the 4th turning right now. It's an historical precedent we have. The 80-year cycles for this nation. Two historians, Strauss and Howe, wrote a book and published it just about before the turn of the century, and they said that America's gone through these 80-year cycles with 20-year cycles within each one, and the 4th cycle is always one of great crisis, and the future of the country is going to be determined by that, and then the cycle has seemed to start over, and they call that the 4th turning. The first one we had was in 1776, and that time when we had the American Revolution and all of those events. The second 80-year 4th turning, we had the American War between the states. The third 4th turning, we had the Great Depression and World War II, and they predicted the next turning would be starting about 2005 or 6 and go through 2025. So that means we're right in the apex of the crisis that they predicted we would experience, and lo and behold, we are in a civil war.
You know, one thing that's interesting to me, Porter, though, is considering how much of that civil conflict is real and how much of it is artificial thanks to a media environment that's completely dishonest and hostile towards the President Trump.
Well, I think that we have forces that are not what they appear to be all the times. I think we've been learning that, and these would be the powers behind the scenes that have seemed to be controlling the nation really since the founding of the Federal Reserve Bank back in the 1914, 1913, that era. We had the whole progressive era. We had the whole form of American fascism that FDR rolled in with the New Deal.
Really, ironic that modern fascism and liberalism are all melded into one now, and it's famously said, if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the form of liberalism.
Well, Ronald Reagan quoted that, and really it's statism is what it is. It's vested interests that have taken the reins of power with the system that's been set up, corporate interest, banking interest, interests we don't even know of.
The deep state.
A
couple of years ago they would have called us nut jobs and tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists for even saying the words deep state, and now it's openly talked about in mainstream media. So there's no denying that this other system exists.
Oh yeah, and anybody that knows, you look at how small towns in America are run, and then you see how larger cities are run, and then you see how the states are run. We'd be totally naive to think that those just aren't smaller versions of what's going on at the national and international level. And then you've got the United Nations and the globalist programs push for a new world order.
And the Oklahoma swamp is as deep and diverse as the swamp that we have in D.C. is what I figured out this last year.
Yeah, every place has their swamp, and we've seen that. And all of this is coming to a head right now. But getting back to what's at hand right now, in this 5th District race, we've had a candidate. Her name is Meredith Van Zandt, who has thrown her hat in the ring and generated some interest among some people and a little bit of controversy. And so I've had a chance to do some research on this. I've had people with this controversy say, get a chance to hear her speak, hear her story, do your research, and make your decision. And that's what we've done. And it turns out that we've got a candidate that could most simply be described as a Democrat that has morphed into a Republican.
Van Zant de transplant is what I'm calling him.
Well, it could be the transplant. As I looked at it, I thought that she has recently self-identified as a Republican, just as transgenders use the term, except transgenders actually feel and act like they say what they have self-identified with. But even though she does a good job talking the talk, her background is just shows that this is not the real deal that's going on right now.
That's what she calls our realization of her Democrat affiliation before 2018, her contributions to these various groups. She calls it a lot of interest in her background.
Yes, we have a lot of interest in her background.
Yes, most certainly.
And really the best way to get to know somebody is to see who their affiliates are. People hang together, birds of a feather flock together, as they say. And when it comes to people that are of a progressive mindset, it's probably no different than a conservative. But I have friends that are progressives, and I've been to events where they are, and they talk a certain way and think a certain way and do things a certain way, and I've seen very few transitions from that. So, but what we have is I've had a chance to see her speak at two different Republican events, and I've got to say on the positive side, she has a lot of real positives about her. She's personable, she's attractive, she's intelligent, she's street smart. She's well trained, she's good on her feet, and she is an entrepreneur. I don't quite have the full scope of the businesses she refers to, but it seems to be yoga businesses for the most part.
I would call her a Kendra Horn 2.0 almost. She's a younger, more articulate version of Kendra Horn. Because I've been up against Kendra Horn in person also, and she's a twit. But anyways, we got to take a break. We'll talk more about Van Zant, the transplant, when we come back.